Nora, Tulane University. I wanted to do some factual clarification. Etisham Oportunidades was not scrapped. It changed names in September to Prospera, and it added some components, but it's well and alive, and it's not been even reduced. So I think that's important. Armando, I have not a problem with your incidence graph at all, but I do have problems with other factual information that you put forward. First, I think that one of the main issues from the little that I know about the Brazilian tax system, the reason why they can't reform it is because in order to reform it, you need to coordinate the state governors. And whatever the federal government wants to do to align state governors that are from different parties and have different agendas would make it very hard. And in fact, it is because you have this very complicated tax system in which you have a VAT and then you have other taxes that move along different states and become a cascading tax system, that the tax system, maybe it is inequality reducing, but as I showed earlier, it is poverty increasing. So it's not really a good tax system from the equity point of view. The federal government has tried to compensate the poor with many programs. Familia, Sin Miseria, Brasil Cariñoso, because they can't undo the knot that they have with the other tax system. And finally, an important thing about the declining inequality in Brazil, as in other countries, I would be a little less, if you want, daring about relinking it to the social spending, because the lion's share of the decline in inequality in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, etc., is a decline in wage inequality. Transfers played a role, but the lion's share, between 60 and 70% of the decline, is explained by a decline in wage inequality. And transfers explained, depending on the country, between 10 and 20%. So we have to be a little bit cautious.
Thank you very much for those comments. Please.
Thank you very much. Ewan Grant, former indirect tax advisor on several international tax reform projects, including for World Bank and EEC, Yemen, Pakistan. My first question is for Dr. Ahmed and then for the other two gentlemen. Dr. Ahmed, every successful indirect tax reform project I've worked on has involved close integration of customs revenues, VAT, and indeed direct taxes. Where it hasn't really worked, those have been treated separately. I think this is actually something the UK tends to score rather well on in advising. Given your criticisms of the World Bank, but noting that about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a new head who's been trying to reform the organization. Do you see if these criticisms that you made, which I share, have really been taken on board? And are there any signs it's coming through? And for the other two gentlemen, you highlighted the takeoff of making social contributions, benefits, together with quite significant rises in the tax take. Are you saying that getting the informal economy, at least partly into the formal economy, that if people are registered, identified for benefits, that's a way of at least getting some taxes back, although it obviously differs depending on their income levels? I know that was a very big problem when I was working in East Africa, but there were some signs of progress there, of identifying who people were and where they lived. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Sheila had a question.
Thank you. We seem to have got quite late in the afternoon without quite understanding what we're trying to do. That's why I rather appreciated Fabio's introduction, where at least he told us what the ILO was trying to do. But Etienne hinted that we really should be looking at something else with his mention of China concentrating on investment, and which I prefer to consider sort of long-term social protection as opposed to short-term social protection, which is the floor in the ILO model. What sort of criteria would each of the panel want to introduce for the trade-off between short-term, straightforward income protection, that sense of social protection, and the long-term building up of the flexibility of an economy so that it becomes offers at least the opportunity for greater income, higher income, and lower inequality in the future of unspecified date.
Thank you very much. I think if there are any questions from this segment, we'll take them now because we'll probably only have time for one round of questions. Okay, with the segment we've gone and we've come back. And Matthew, please, final question.
Hi, Matthew Greenslade. I work on social protection in DFID. Thanks for 3 great presentations. Working on social protection with DFID-focused countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, the task seems to be becoming huge in terms of advising on what social protection system or helping governments to think through what the social protection system should look like in the future, how it connects with tax reform, how it connects with formalisation and wider economic development. I mean, it's tremendously, this is getting too demanding, it's getting out of hand sort of thing. I just wondered if anyone, including particularly Fabio perhaps, well everyone, had any advice on how you start breaking this task down, I mean, to make it manageable. How at least can we help countries to develop a vision for the social protection system, which I don't think we're doing at all at the moment. Poorer countries I'm thinking of.
Thank you very much for that, Matthew. Now I think, you can make it very, very briefly if you'd like to. Yep, just very brief, please.
Hi, my name is Verena from Development Pathways, and I had, especially for the ILO Fabio, I had a little question regarding to what extent does the ILO consider programs maybe a bit more alternatives that doesn't include really so many amount of members contributing to the systems, like for example in the Philippines, Alcanshaya, which is a very small program. To what extent do they include this as formalizing the informal economy? Yeah, let's leave it there.
Thank you very much. I think those are rather large questions, and we probably have 5 minutes between the panel to answer them. So I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to invite each panel member to answer whichever question they feel that they'd like to share with the floor, and then invite those people who don't have their questions answered, in the case of everybody except Matthew, to come back after the event and speak to the presenters. And for Matthew, I think possibly this would be the subject for another workshop. Well, it seems like quite a large question. But let's start from the left and go across, and I invite each presenter to respond to those points they think are most salient and will be most helpful for us as a group. So may I start with you, please, Fabio?
Okay.
And you have just, I'm afraid I can say 2 minutes, I'm afraid.
Okay. Difficult questions. I don't have the answers for these questions. Complex. Well, the first one is in what extent registering people, that is more, I have 2 similar questions. To what extent registering people is part of formalization? Okay. Well, fighting informality is more than putting people in a registry. I think this is the final result of formalizing the informal economy, formalization in terms of taxes, formalization in terms of employment, and formalization in terms of other areas. So formalization is a broad set of policies, including policies, for example, for financing micro and small enterprises, but increasing enterprise capacities and competitiveness, education, many complex variables affecting the capacity of the economic system, but specifically the economic system for small and micro and small enterprises to be integrated properly in the economy. So this is more than putting people in a register is the final result of formalization. But it's clear that when we measure formalization in many countries, or employment formalization, that is this component, in many countries, we consider if the person is the employee, if the employee is registered or not in the Social Security Administration. And in fact, that creates confusion in terms of understanding the concept and the objective of formalizing the informal economy. The other question in terms of is regarding if we need to put the effort in the short term versus long term in terms, for example, with income security programs. I don't know, but I think that the answer depends on the specific national context. For example, for very low income countries, for poor countries like South Africa, Sub-Saharan countries, or some of these Sub-Saharan countries, perhaps, in my opinion, the best strategy is to work to put the efforts in the short term, in very basic issues. Okay.
Thank you, Fabio. Thank you very much. Armando.
Right. Just the two very quick factual points that Nora raised. It's true that the states are an issue because one of the two main VAT schemes is actually collected at the state level and collects something like 20% of revenue, so it's very significant. But in the paper, we argue that there are many other areas of policy where the government has been able to prevail over the states. The first one is on fiscal responsibility, where the state actually assumed authority over fiscal matters, which was the issue that led to the hyperinflation in the 90s. And the second really big example is Bolsa Familia, because Bolsa Familia does not include the states as a partner. It's a direct connection between the federal government and the municipalities. So if in these other areas the government can actually get through legislation, there is no reason why they couldn't do it here. The second issue that you raised is true. I mean, all I was trying to show with the graph is that there is a break. I wasn't necessarily arguing that the public expenditure is actually leading to the whole kind of change in the gene. You're right. There is significant growth in the economy. There is but without the fiscal and the social contract, it's unlikely that you would have been able to get the reduction in inequality from the same level of growth and commodity boom. So I think I was trying to kind of connect them really, and perhaps I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Armando. And the last word is
Thank you. I'll just quick comment on the oportunidades. Having been involved with some of the discussions, there were proposals to scrap it altogether. The argument for doing so was threefold. One was that there was leakage in the flow of funds. Secondly, it is creating an entitlement. Thirdly, it was affecting labor market incentives. So, Vidagurai, being the political animal he was, he said, let's design something else which gives more in the way of lump sum to the same people, so that you don't get the kickback effect. And what they did was to turn it into a labor market. You get a lump sum if you want to start a business, so it's breaking the entitlement. So you also get a scholarship if you want to send your child to university. So it's really moving it away from being an entitlement, which the oportunidades had become, into a more of a labor market enhancing. But the way they did it was actually very smart, because nobody saw it being any money being taken away. That would have led to uproar. So I think they did a fantastic job, and they've changed the nature of the transfer.
You're saying they took away the CCT component?
Yep. So I mean, it's
That's all the information I have.
well, that's the design issues that I'm aware of that were being discussed. And if you read the law, and this is exactly what it says. I think the issue of the design of the tax administration is actually a very good one. As a matter of fact, in late 90s, the World Bank had financed a study of the tax administration done by Shahid Hussain, who was a former vice president. It was a very nice study which had recommended an integrated administration. On the basis of that, they come up with a $150 million loan for the creation of a Federal Bureau of Revenue. And all that money achieved was a nice new building, cars and equipment, but nothing substantive in the way of true integration.
It's a lovely building.
It's a nice building, but they didn't actually do what the tax administration reform was meant to do. And that, I think, was, in retrospect, and I've looked at this very hard, was partly political, because it was in the interest of the military government and, unfortunately, also the succeeding political governments to use the tax administrations to make friends and influence people. So having an integrated tax administration with a lot of transparency is not in their interest. And unfortunately, the World Bank still has that model and said instead of 150 million, now take 300 million. But what good is it going to do until you really get to the incentive structures?
The World Bank isn't comfortable with soldiers.
Yeah, but I mean, they've just given them $300 million to do more of the same. So
May I invite you to continue this one afterwards? I mean, it's about incentives, it's about political economy. Thank you very much for being an absolutely excellent and very stimulating panel.